How's it going, guys? Kyle here with Formal Ranch, and today I am excited to be talking to you about the Armasight Operator 640. So in a nutshell, as quickly as I can explain it, what is the Operator 640? It is a clip-on thermal device. Now, if you're not familiar with what that means, it literally means that it will clip on in front of your daytime optic and will essentially convert that daytime spectrum to the thermal spectrum. Now, because it can detach fairly readily and easily with the included American Defense mount that is on the Operator, you can technically use it as a handheld, and you can just ditch your daytime optic, mount it rearward. You can enable a reticle function and use it as a dedicated optic. So it does a lot, and because of that, we're gonna get into all of the nitty gritty. The video will be segmented. Check the description below if you wanna skip around to what you're most interested in. And the reason I'm getting into the nitty gritty, if you're not aware of how I do things on the channel, I don't like to take things out single use, slap a positive review on it and say, hey, this is worth your hard-earned money, because that's just not how I do things. That being said, I've been running this now for almost 4 months. I've spent a lot of time behind it because I wanted to actually go through the functions, the settings, the menu system, and test the overall reliability so I can give you an actual educated breakdown of how this thing runs and where it has some deficiencies and where it really excels. And as part of me wanting to be transparent, I do want to make you aware Armasight did send this my way. They reached out to me and offered to send it for review. And of course, I like to play with these kind of toys, so I said yes. So just want to make you guys aware I did not purchase this with my own money, but it does not influence what I'm going to say in this review, and you guys are going to see it at the same time they see this video. And real quick, guys, I gotta give a shout out to the Formal Ranch Patreon supporters. If it wasn't for you guys, I literally probably would have stepped away from YouTube by this point because it's just not conducive to this kind of content, as most of you are aware. So as a thank you, if you're not aware, I am giving something away the first of the month, every month on the Formal Ranch Patreon page. I encourage you to go in there, check it out. I do talk about stuff in advance of it ever seeing YouTube. And if you want to get in touch with me, that is where I put the most time and energy in just answering questions and trying to help put out good info. I can't respond to every comment on YouTube. There's just too many of them. Now, Optics Planet is also a current channel supporter. They have discount code 4MRR, which will save you 7% off your entire order at a minimum. And I say that because sometimes it's more. Today, I actually used it and I saved 12% off on a handguard that I wanted for an upcoming project. Speaking of upcoming projects, we got a lot of stuff in the works with Warhammer Armaments, another channel supporter. I have information about them in the link tree below, so feel free to show them some love if you are so inclined. Now, circling back to the Operator 640, like I said, it is kind of a do-it-all device. That's what most thermal clip-ons are being marketed as. Before I get into the details, I think it's relevant to just kind of start with my initial impressions and unboxing. So they do kind of send it in a nice, kind of like deployment style bag. So very similar to like what you get a government-issued PVS-14 or night vision device. And on that note, that's what stuck out to me the most about the Operator 640 and most of Armasight's latest product line is not only does it look like it's something government issued, and because of that, the aesthetic I think looks awesome on this Mark 12, but it also feels like something that could be contract issued because the entire body is solid. It's aluminum. There's nothing that feels cheap, plasticky, or fragile whatsoever on the unit. So the first thing I remember noticing when I pulled it out of this bag for the first time is, wow, this thing feels like it's built like a tank. And that's kind of what I expected because of Armasight's recent track record. Now, as far as what's included, you get a couple batteries. I would hope so for the price tag. Speaking of which, since it's kind of initial impression, at the time of this video, it's $4,000. You guys absolutely destroy me in the comments for not mentioning it, but I don't know if you're seeing this in 3 years or if you're watching it at the time of upload. So at the time of this video, it's $4,000. You do get a handful of eye cups. So you can tell this one looks like it'll fit like a 50mm objective lens, really nice. Notice I'm not currently running any cups and I didn't have any issues overall with light pollution coming out, at least that I was aware of. But you do get a variety of eye cups, one of which looks like for if you wanted to use it as a dedicated optic, it'll slide over and you kind of have a built-in eye cup to kind of get you the proper eye relief. Okay, for quick reference, here is the view of my fence. I'm about 10 yards away and you are looking at a bird feeder on the fence that's about 8 inches tall. So right now we got some good contrast from a thermal perspective, and I just wanted to briefly cover the field of view. So this is on a camera rig, so anything weird out of focus is not necessarily how it looks to the user's eye. It's a result of the camera rig, so let me pop this on in front. This is at 1x magnification. Again, we're looking at about an 8-inch bird feeder. You can see the sun hitting the fence, so good thermal contrast right there. But what I want to cover, because I get this question a lot, is the field of view that you can expect through this. So I recommend an LPVO because right now you're at 1x power. What I want to point out is you see the entire peripheral of the screen with all that readout information you have. So for example, if we were to hit record on the unit, you see in both the bottom left and the top of the screen that the unit is in fact recording. Now again, it looks a little out of focus, especially the bottom left. That's just a result of me trying to focus through an optic and then another optic with a camera. It's very difficult. It looks crystal clear all around the screen to the user's eye. So here it is at 1x magnification. Now, if you crank things up to 2x, this is now what you're looking at. So you start to lose some of that peripheral field of view. And again, that looks totally out of focus where that red recording marker is in the bottom left. It's still crystal clear to the user's eye when looking through the optics. So just reiterating that one more time. But as soon as you go above 2 power, you start losing that menu information. So your battery life indicator that was in the top right of the screen, your direction that you're looking at, your white hot, all that. So just giving you an idea why I recommend an LPVO with digital clip-ons. There are different clip-ons that you can use an actual medium or high power optical device behind, but this is not the case for digital clip-ons. So this is 2x, here's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And I know it's looking a little darker to you guys. It's once again an illusion of the camera, but notice how the reticle, you can now see your daytime holds. And once you get things collimated, you can actually use those holds. It's pretty nice. You will be getting pixelated because you're zooming in on a digital screen. But even here at 8x magnification, I found the Operator 640 screen to be fairly usable. Yes, I'm pixelated, but it's still going to help me with a more precise hold. And especially when you get back out to, you know, the 2x range, it's a very pleasing image to the user's eye. I was very happy with this. And just wanted to show you as best I can what it looks like to my eye when I'm looking through this, because when I'm using the trigger cam footage, it obviously doesn't have the dynamic range or the focusing capabilities that this camera does. So hopefully this conveys things a little bit better for you guys. Well, I'll roll then into getting this thing set up for the first time. Now, Armasight did advertise that you wouldn't need to collimate this. I think on their website it says ready to shoot right out of the box. So not diving into the weeds too much, but if you're not aware what I mean when I say collimation, there's a digital screen in here. So when you add this in front of your daytime optic, if that screen is not aligned perfectly with the real world, then even if you're perfectly zeroed through this, once you put that screen that is offset improperly, then what you think you're looking at isn't what you're looking at, meaning what you're aiming at isn't what you're aiming at, and you're gonna miss. So they advertise that you don't need to make any adjustments. For the most part, I'd say that's pretty close to being true. I've definitely seen worse. The RH25 V2, for example, which is a $6,000 unit, at 100 yards, I wasn't even on paper. This guy was on paper. It was off by a couple inches at 100 yards, and I then fine-tuned it via digital collimation, meaning that I did translate the screen inside. So that's a fairly simple setting. Now, that is relevant because if you can't adjust that, then you are at the mercy of how well an optic aligns. So there are some thermal clip-ons out there that don't allow for collimation. Most of the new ones do. This one does. So let me just show you how I collimated it real quick. Okay, so just walking you through my process on digital collimation. This was my point of aim at 100 yards. This was my daytime zero. So first step is you want to make sure your daytime optic is obviously zeroed. That should go without speaking, but had to say it for some of you guys out there. So point of aim, here was our point of impact. So a little up, a little right. That means that the way that this is interfacing with this particular optic is not keeping the image perfectly one-to-one. That is kind of to be expected. Now, fortunately, we can adjust that. Now, my little hack is to put a piece of foil tape here where that group was, so that we can see those impacts, because it's not like a daytime optic where it's very easy to see. I'm really punching in, it's pretty pixelated. These things are great for hunting and looking at living things, not super great at seeing bullet holes at 100 yards. They are not dedicated thermal scopes, they are a supplemental tool for your daytime optic. So now what we'll do is go back down to the bench. I'm gonna hold everything steady. I'll have our point of aim here where it was, and I'll drag and drop the correction to be there, and it should then be digitally collimated. Obviously we'll verify that, but that is my process for doing this. Now, as best as I can show you, on the right-hand side is what I saw to my eye, kind of, because the trigger cam just doesn't look nearly as good as I'm able to see things. So I'm holding over that tape that is on our original point of aim. There's the tape to the top right that was our actual point of impact. So now, keeping my rifle as still as possible, what I'm simply doing is holding over that point of aim and translating digitally the image until the point of aim goes over to the point of impact. So the key here is keep your platform as still as possible. So here I am not moving the rifle, but I'm now digitally translating the screen. And you can see on the internal recording to the left, we're changing the coordinates. So the key is you gotta keep things as still as possible. Otherwise, what you gotta do is trial and error shooting groups, but I found this to be a little bit more efficient. So what I'm doing is I first do the elevation, then I went to the windage. I'm doing one coordinate at a time, essentially, just to eliminate some variables. Of course, you wanna shoot and confirm your shots from there. Okay, so this is where I kept grouping because I kept using the bore sight function, and that is actually to zero the reticle if you opt to turn it on. So I kept grouping there. I'm like, what the heck's going on? If you dive a little deeper, there's the actual collimation. So after making my first adjustment of collimation, not the best group. I mean, we're pixelated image, but we did average actually pretty nicely over the bullseye. So all that to say, you can fine tune this as much as you want. You can get the most precise daytime zero that your heart desires, and then you do have the ability to tweak this. And that's an important feature when you're looking at thermal clip-ons if they're not going to be or guarantee perfect collimation out of the box, which most do not. So doing it with the target can obviously be a little bit tedious depending on how well you can see what's glowing on the target and trying to get a precise grouping. The perk on clip-on thermals, if you don't have to digitally collimate them, is that you can lean on your precise daytime zero, throw the clip-on on, and go to work. So my kind of workaround, if you don't want to deal with actually grouping using the thermal, depending on your eyesight and other challenging conditions, environment, etc., is obviously daytime optic is zeroed. If you have a supplemental optic like this acro that I have mounted at 12 o'clock, or if you mount a laser of sorts, then you can shine the laser, co-align it with your daytime optic at the distance you want to digitally collimate, or you co-align your red dot or supplemental optic, throw the clip-on on, and then every now and then, adjust the clip-on image while looking through your daytime optic and make sure that your supplemental optic is still on the bullseye, and then just get your daytime reticle to line up, and then that'll do it. You can see where that red dot is on the bullseye. The daytime optic is also on the bullseye. I know it's hard to see, guys. It's tricky to do this with a camera, but you get the idea. Both are zeroed. Now what I'm doing is having that red dot that should be aligned. What I would then do is, once again, digitally collimate until that reticle goes where I am aiming with the red dot as well. Now, one thing that is interesting, and this goes to, like I said, I tested it for months, not just a couple range sessions. I noticed that the collimation did vary slightly between different optics. So on the first time out, I think I was running it on my SIG Spear, and I just tested it at 25 yards, and it was actually dead nuts on, so no collimation was needed. On that same platform, I tried it at 100 yards, and it was off by maybe an MOA, 2 MOA. And then finally, when I was working on some comparison data in terms of clip-on optics and which ones are the best out of the box, that's a future video to come. There's details on the 4MR Ranch Patreon already, some behind the scenes and upcoming info for you guys. When I put it on this, it was off even more, so I then collimated it to this optic. Now the cool thing is there are multiple profiles, so no, you don't have to do that every time. If you want to bounce it between 2, 3, whatever platforms, you can make a profile for each one. They did include an American Defense Manufacturing quick detach mount, which they have a good reputation for reliability and repeatability of your zero. So I'm glad to see that. It makes it very kind of buy once, cry once situation where you can bounce it around from all your platforms. So wasn't overall that hard to collimate. The only issue I ran into is I kept thinking bore sight was to do the collimation, and that was not the case. I figured it out, and then it was good to go. I would recommend that they probably put the clip-on mode collimation higher in the menu system, since, in my opinion, this is marketed as a clip-on, and the dedicated optic function is really a secondary function, so it should be more secondary in the menu to zero that, but hey, whatever, that's a nitpick. So with the ability to collimate it being out of the way, and not only collimate it, save multiple profiles to make it more useful and less of a pain once you get it all set up for the first time, The next thing is, how good is the thermal performance? Now, keep in mind, there's nothing I can do to really give you the full experience of how good this thing looks to your eye. Unfortunately, I have to record it with cameras or put on my trigger cam, which definitely doesn't have the highest quality when looking through an optic and then into a digital screen. So it's really just to kind of give you an idea of what my eye is seeing, but in no way does it really give it the full effect. So just keep that in mind, guys. Plus, it's being compressed and uploaded to YouTube. This thing did perform very well. The thermal sensitivity was more than acceptable, and I was able to see cows at over 1,000 yards away. So I don't know what more you would want. I also noticed that the screen inside here held up fairly well if I punched into almost 6 power. Yes, it's going to become a lot more pixelated, but it would help me make a more precise shot and did also help me in the zeroing process. So overall, it did pretty good. Now, I do want to talk about the actual screen inside this unit. It's both a pro and a con. Now, I'll get the bad out of the way so we can end on the good. Although this thing can function as a dedicated optic, me personally, I wouldn't recommend leaning on it for that. I don't know what the proper terminology is, but I've noticed different clip-ons. Sometimes the screens are really big and it's kind of projected like it's intended to be looked at through the naked eye more so than through an optic. This one and some other units that I've seen, the screen almost feels like it's far away. And the advantage to that is that you can zoom in more optically before you start losing that field of view. It works better as a dedicated clip-on than it would a dedicated optic. So hopefully I illustrated that. I'll try to overlay some sample footage. But in a nutshell, this thing would not be the best to use as a dedicated optic because that screen just feels really far away. Although you can see the information, it's not the best use of it. And as part of that, the rear diopter is not adjustable. So you can't do anything to make that screen feel closer or change the sharpness. You're really relying on your daytime optic to do that. So the preceding part of the video is really just trying to give you some insights on what this thing is and how it performs, and so you can draw your own conclusions. Here's kind of my review, I guess, segment. So it's really just things I noticed. Nitpicks, I had mentioned that this thing isn't really a great dedicated optic because of the way the optical interface is on the rear, no adjustable rear diopter. That being said, I don't care because I don't want to use this as a dedicated thermal optic. I want to use it as a clip-on, and because of the way that optical setup is in the back, it's better as a dedicated thermal clip-on. So that is my opinion. It depends on what you want to run it for. So just take that with a grain of salt. Now, another nitpick, I love that it has a nice steel cable lanyard to retain this front rubber. The problem is when you're actually using it, this thing just kind of flops. After some recoil, it does pop around. So as long as you don't mind this number here, then you may want to opt to leave it retained. It's not a super tight fit where it's fairly easy to get bumped off if you're actually using this thing and brush and taking it in and out of vehicles hunting like I have. So I opted to leave the lanyard on. I don't want to scratch the germanium lens. When I was running it, I would just kind of try to wrap it around and tuck it under, and for the most part, it stayed retained. It would be kind of cool if they came up with some better system to try to retain that when you're actually using it. I know their sidekick line, for example, the little lens protector, it's really cool. It's got a notch and it slides into the side and it actually retains very, very well. So maybe they can implement something like that. Again, it's a nitpick, but it's something I noticed during use and I just wanted to share that with you. In terms of reliability, I didn't notice losing any of the collimation. It is on an American Defense manufacturing mount, so a high quality mount. I'm glad they did not cheap out on the mount. I can't stand when thermal clip-ons perform great, but then they have a junk mount, so then technically they don't perform great. So happy to report on that. Battery life is actually really solid. I don't love that it's two CR123s because they are a little bit more pricey and that tab really does kind of add up over time. That being said, they advertise 4 hours of battery life, and I think that's probably a conservative estimate. For a while, I just left the original pair of batteries in there, and I don't think I swapped them for a while because I had it on, just doing some plinking at the range, verify collimation. I would turn it off, and then I went hunting a few times or scanning. Hunting season has been terrible, so there's not any kill shots to share with you guys on this optic in particular. Sorry, guys. But the optic seemed to be fairly efficient from a power standpoint. Now, that being said, another con or nitpick is that there was not a sleep function. A lot of thermal optics, you tap the power button and it'll turn the display off to save battery life, and then you can tap it and make it go back on. I did not catch that on this optic. You had to actually shut it down and turn it back on. Not a super long boot cycle, but that could potentially make you miss what you're going for. So it'd be nice if they could update that in a firmware update in the future, just to make it even more efficient and have you burn through less CR123 batteries. Obviously, my preference would be an 18650 battery powering this, because those are plentiful, they're rechargeable, and overall you'll save a lot of money on batteries. But you know, it works very well with CR123s, which are still very common. So not totally upset about the CR123s, just another consideration to share with you guys. My biggest complaint is how awfully slow the transfer speeds are when you want to download your data. So even hardwired into a fast data transfer speed USB Type-C port, because it does have a USB Type-C port on the side to access your media, it literally took 2 hours to transfer about 4 gigabytes of thermal data. That is absolutely insane to me. So it's one of those things where you honestly just need to walk away when you download your media every so often. So just making you guys aware of that. And the only reliability issue that I technically had is that the unit froze a single time, but I was adjusting the thermal profile while recording on the device. I was trying to show you guys the enhancements and adjustments that you can make, and the unit froze. So I had to do a hard reboot, and then it was fine. So I think it's a little unfair to penalize it, because it's probably not ideal to be optimizing the thermal sensor while also using the processor to record, but I did discover that the processor could not handle that. So overall, the Operator 640 is a solid thermal. It comes in at a fair price point of $4,000 at the time of this video, which is on par with other 640 core thermals, but I would argue that it is built substantially better than some of the 640 core thermals. Now, the thermal imagery is a little bit more subjective because people have their preferences. I like to use the analogy of I'm a Sony shooter, I'm recording on a Sony camera. You might be a Canon guy where you like Canon colors better and you think Sony camera sensors look gross. So that's a little more subjective. From a performance standpoint though, you can't argue that this thing did very good. I could see things at 1,000 yards away. I could see paw prints of my animals walking across my floor, meaning that it is a sensitive thermal sensor as well. So overall, solid performer at a fair price point at the time of releasing this video. But I think that should cover about everything for Operator 640. So if I left anything unanswered, drop a comment and I will do my best to respond. Again, the 4Mile Ranch Patreon page is the absolute best way to get in touch with me if you want to get into the nitty gritty and have some discussion on insights on anything that I talk about on the channel. Again, shout out to Optics Planet. Discount code 4MRR will save you 7% off everything site-wide, which would include a bad boy like this. And otherwise, guys, if you're still watching, I really appreciate your time. And as always, have a good one.